Welcome to Interview Connections. We're the first ever podcast booking agency. I'm Jessica Rhodes, the founder. And 12 years ago in 2013, I started booking my dad as a guest on podcasts because I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And fast forward to today, we're a multi-seven-figure agency. We've worked with over 800 clients. We've booked more than 30,000 podcast interviews. And this podcast is all of our top lessons from the last 12 years, booking entrepreneurs on podcasts, scaling our company to be multi-seven figures a year, distilled down into bite-sized topics and episodes to help you learn from us. I co-host this show with Interview Connections co-owner and CEO, Margie. And without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. I am joined here by one of our amazing clients at Interview Connections who's had incredible results that I am so excited to hear about. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Jonathan Porter-Whistman. Jonathan, please come up on the stage and just share with everyone in our audience here who you are and what your business is.
I love getting on stage without leaving my couch. So thank you for that. I am the author of a book called The Sales Boss. It's all about hiring, managing, and training a sales team. I've built and sold a couple of companies, and based on that, people ask me, what should I do with my business? So I was able to help them with that. Currently, I run an AI company that's completely focused on helping people identify and hire the right people for their team using data to predict how people will do pre-hire.
Awesome. And so one of the things that I talked about in our guest expert incubator today was kind of knowing where you are when you're starting to leverage podcast guesting, because that helps determine what your goals are. So when you started getting booked on podcasts and working with us at Interview Connections, where were you at in your business? You had already had clearly a lot of success with selling, other companies. So where were you at and what were your goals?
So I'll back up a little bit to my book because it'll make sense. In my book, I use the sales boss. Boss is an acronym for how do you have success and what are the levers you can pull. And it's behavior, like the thing you do, your outlook, what are you thinking between your head, that sort of thing, skill. And the last thing is stature, right? Are you accepted as an expert? When you walk into the room, that's going to be how difficult is it for you to make progress in your business. And so I had already built a couple of successful companies in my even in my hiring platform. I had a great audience inside of enterprise businesses, so very large tech companies, those sort of things. But I was trying to make a move into more of the home services where I was completely unknown. And I had no expertise, no status in there. My book really meant nothing because nobody in those industries would have read it. And I certainly hadn't spoke on any of those stages. And so I reached out to your team with the desire to say, how do you introduce me to the home services, blue collar world? So these would be construction companies, HVAC, plumbing, and electrical. I think you booked me on about 30 podcasts. I'm just going to use back of napkin. And you gave me some nice coaching. You helped me with my one sheet and then started making introductions that were right up my alley.
And tell us a little bit about the results that you've seen. And I'm excited to hear because I haven't heard the full, story of results, but I'm sure that you're happy because you've referred about 1 million potential clients.
Well, let's say it's been terrible. And I thought if I was going to suffer that bad, all my friends should suffer with me. So the return is almost immediate for me. I of course, signed new clients. I still haven't had all the podcasts I've been on air yet, but I would say within my first two podcasts airing, I was well over 6 figures in return over what I would have spent for you for the entire period. So don't raise your rates. I shouldn't have told you that. But the value of that was right away customers. But also out of that, a couple of good opportunities for investors in my new venture. And I've had a couple of ventures since then as well, new businesses that I'm going into. And a lot of the people that I'm being introduced to are from somebody that either heard me on the show or from those podcast guests. So I would say easily 6 figures, might even be getting close to 9 figures, I would say, by the end of the year.
Oh my goodness. That is absolutely.
So then you have to call me the $1 million podcast guest. I'm going to add it to my one sheet.
You're entering an elite club of podcast guests. That's incredible. So I would love to kind of gather What about your approach to podcast guesting do you think generated those results? I mean, of course, working with us and getting on the right shows and all that stuff. But one of the, like, I talked in the incubator today about delivering immense value, giving an effective call to action, networking with hosts. What do you think you did to help generate such a quick ROI?
One of the things that was in your early training. So one, I watched all the training, even though, I train salespeople all the time. So it's easy to say I'm the expert. I don't really need to listen, but I'm like, if I'm going to pay for something, I'm going to listen and go through it. And one of the things that the training had was make sure in the green room before that you ask the host, what is it that your audience is wanting to achieve? So I have my executive assistant for all of the shows. She pulls research on who the hosts are. She pulls a couple of their podcast episodes. She looks at all their social media, what's important to them personally. And then I review that the day before. And so when I'm getting on that show, I feel like I've already met them. And so I'm asking them, how is it that I can help their audience? I say, this is my understanding of who listens to your show and why they love you. And how can I make them love you more? And that sort of sets the right tone. And then second, I think I don't have a real clear offer at the end. So I think, that's something that a lot of people could do is say, hey, go to this website, do that. I actually think it's worked to my benefit because it's really clear that I'm not selling. And the truth is, we're in the day of the internet. So if somebody hears my book, The Sales Boss, or my name, Jonathan Whistman, now I have Porter in front of it because I got married, so I took her name on with mine. But on the podcast, a lot of times they'll just say Whistman, so they can, if but people know how to get in touch with you. And so I think just being in the moment and having a great time and not taking yourself too seriously is really what it takes.
I love that so much because I give the tips and we give the advice of here are the rules of thumb and everything. But something I say is our clients go out there, implement it, and the what we teach really comes from their experience. So I love hearing you say, I don't really have one clear call to action. I give great value, I connect with the host, and then people that need me will find me. It's not that hard to Google my name. And it's kind of counterintuitive to just say, oh, just say whatever and they'll find you, but it's clearly working for you. And I think that's the lesson is there's not a one size fits all approach to this.
And I have learned that if you can tell stories that people can paint themselves in that picture. So when the host asks me about something particular and my point of view, there's a lot of times I can say the way I came to have this point of view is I was working with Jessica and she had XYZ sort of thing. And what we discovered together was why. And it's so that your listener then goes, oh, I'm sort of like Jessica. And it rings true to me. And then that causes them to want to reach out to you.
Yes, absolutely. That's such a good point of sharing stories so the listeners can see themselves in the shoes of the person that you're describing, the client that you're describing.
One of the things that was sort of unexpected to me, sort of a pleasant surprise, is there's been a few that I've been introduced to, and I've thought, this is gonna be this is gonna be terrible. I'm gonna take it anyway. They don't have very much listenership, and I get on the sort of the pre-meeting. I'm like, oh, this host is terrible. Like they're sort of. Let's hope all my podcast people don't listen to this. Oh, that way. But they're just like you could tell they hadn't been at it long. They were more uncomfortable than I was. Enough so that a couple of them I almost wanted to call a halt to it. And I said, you know what? I'm here. Let me just have a good time. And the handful of people that listened to their show were some of their biggest fans, right? These were people that could overlook that they weren't polished, that they hadn't done a great job on their show, but they tuned in because they had a really strong relationship with them. And those were the people that actually could call the host and say, hey, could you introduce me to Jonathan? And then I could get that really direct connection. So I would say never judge it like you're going to judge it. Don't act
Yeah.
on that judgment, right? Like just smile and treat every single host as though they have a million downloads on every single episode. And the surprising thing that I also didn't expect, and then I'll be quiet, you can ask me questions, but that for every show you booked for me, I at least got two other shows. So when you're thinking about your cost per show, like if you're good, it's actually probably a third of that price.
Wow, that's amazing. I love the way you put that. And I also love your perspective on the shows that aren't as polished. We have another client who kind of had a similar perspective on that. He says, sometimes the shows, especially if you're a coach, if you're a sales coach, if you have expertise that could help a podcast host be more successful and more polished and everything, they could become your client. So I love the way you described that. And that's also such an important point too. Sometimes the hosts that have the smaller audiences, they have a small but very engaged following, and their following could call them up. Whereas the bigger the host, the more walls there are around them and their audience, because they're more kind of at that celebrity stature where, you can't just call up your favorite podcast host if they have a really big audience. But if they have a small audience, they could make those direct intros. That's gold.
Yeah, and so I'll give two power tips that, at least for me. One is when I get to the end of the show, they always want to chat at the end. And so, you just do the normal banter, but then I would ask if you, for instance, if you were the host, I would say, "Hey, I'm curious, Jessica, you're great at interviewing people. Do you ever sit in my seat? What podcast have you had to be on or been on?" And they'll start talking about their experience, and I'll ask them, "Well, why were you on those shows?" And they'll say, "Well, they liked my expertise in XYZ." And I'll say, "I'm curious, do you know them well? Would you be comfortable, based on the interview we did, sharing me as a guest with them? I know you're always looking for people." And a
Yes.
lot of times they'll make that connection after theirs, because they want to do a favor. Everybody's wants to pay back a favor to someone, and you're giving them an excuse to reach out to somebody that has interviewed them and where it went well, because they're only going to refer you to ones where they knocked it out of the park, right? And the host thought they did a great job.
I love that. I mean, our Team Interview Connections books me on podcasts, but I've gotten shows. One of my favorite interviews that I've done, I saw a friend was interviewed on their show and made that connection with me. And then that host has now interviewed many of our clients, and it's just been such a great experience. So I love that, just connecting with them and what other shows have you been on? And I love that you pointed out that, working with us will get you on 30 shows, but you're going to get a lot more than 30, because people will hear you on a podcast that we've booked you on and then invite you. The host will make those connections. Like, it really does snowball into so many more interview opportunities.
Yeah, and I have about 50% of the shows I've been on, I have the host's personal cell phone, because I always ask him, I'm like, I'm thinking of this person that I should connect you to. And they always respond way better if I just connect you on the cell phone. Do you mind if I do that? And so they'll, oh, sure. And they're going to give me their cell phone. Right now, I'm not going to abuse that. But when I want to get in touch with them, I know I have a really quick, so when the podcast comes out, I text them and say, "Hey, great. I reposted that. I'm getting good feedback." And of course I send them a connection to somebody. There's usually always somebody in your network that you think, they would be, that would be worth connecting them to.
That's amazing. Are there any other words of wisdom or tips that you want to share with our audience about having success with podcast guesting?
I would say it's surprising how fast you can get known in an industry. And I think you can underestimate the speed at which you can go if you really just give it a concerted effort. So now, if I meet somebody in the home services space, they've sort of seen who I am, and it's also served to get me on stages, because they're listening to podcasts that are in their industry, listening to the guests, and if you do a great job on that, they're also looking for speakers, right, to be speaking from their stage. So I've been able to trade that out for booths at their shows that are next door, those sort of things. And that's my AI thumbs up. So
Yes. That's incredible. And what advice do you have? I would guess that you're going to recommend folks come work with us at Interview Connections. But for those in our audience who are sitting on the fence, who are thinking about booking a call or working with us, what would you say to them right now?
I would say just stay right on the fence. There's plenty of other people that want to be successful. You can wait a year.
This is when I would tell my daughter, that's sarcasm.
Yeah, I would say get started. There's no time, and you're never going to feel ready for it. In fact, most of the podcasts I get on, the 20 minutes before, I'm like, why the heck am I doing this? I don't feel like doing a podcast today. And then it goes great, and I'm actually in a good mood afterwards, and it impacts the rest of my business.
It's just like a good workout. You never want to do it, but then you do it and you're so glad you did.
Yeah. So it's sort of, I call that taking the irreversible step, right? It's sort of like standing on a high dive. You do like quit thinking about hitting the water and just think about taking a step forward because you take a step forward every day without thinking about it. The only difference is this one has a 30-foot fall and the water's warm.
And let me just back up a little bit. You will want to do podcasts. Jonathan may be resistant to doing it, but clearly it's worked really well.
Yeah, and when I say I'm just saying that's what can go on
Yeah.
in our head, right? Because people are busy, and I think the best people never feel like they're fully prepped,
Yeah.
right? And which sort of keeps them sharp. But if you can get in your head and go, oh, wait, let me wait till my landing page is perfect. Let me wait until I get this done or that done. And there's nothing like just getting out and doing it to get better at it.
Yeah. And I think that's such a good point. And I think the other thing is this is doing a podcast interview is for your future self. It is getting you visible. It won't be live for maybe a month or two. Like it's that you won't see the immediate gratification. So sometimes we get caught in like, I have to do things right now for today, but it is a gift to your future self. So it is worth getting over the battle of like, am I ready? Do I have other things I need to do today? Just do it.
Here's what I know about experts. Experts love to share their knowledge because they feel like they're giving a gift to the world. Like there's a personal benefit that comes right from being able to have a platform to spread your message. And so I would just think about whatever amount that you're going to pay to have somebody book you on a show. Just imagine yourself lighting it on fire as an incense, right? And it's gone. And for that, you get the benefit of blessing the world. And you got to pay to do it. You give money to the poor, you give to a lot of causes you care about. I mean, you're the best cause in the world. Why wouldn't you give it to yourself? You're a blessing to the world. So do that. And if you can do that, you're going to be less focused on the ROI, and that's going to come through to your audience. They're going to care you're there. They're going to see you're there because you care about them and not because you care about getting a return.
Amazing. That's so good. So for everyone watching, if you haven't booked your consultation call, go to interviewconnections.com/call. We'll have the link below this video. Jonathan, where can everyone connect with you online if they want your book or learn more about your business?
They can just Google the sales boss and I'll come up everywhere.
Amazing. Nice SEO. Wonder if podcast guesting helped you with that.
I don't know. Might have.
Well, thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for everyone for watching. If you're watching live or the replay, just comment on this video so we can come back and say hello.